Who could know, back in the early 1970s, that what started in a small brick building in Beaver Creek, Ohio, would emerge as an innovative powerhouse in the technology world. The company evolved to be called Lexis Nexis and would go on to impact the world in powerful ways. From its humble beginnings, this company and its people set the world on a path that led to the information age. Join us for conversations that reveal how this amazing organization evolved and grew.
All right. Hey, welcome back, folks. This is part 3 of the interview or the conversation we're having about the history of Mead Data Central, Lexis Nexis. We have Keith Hawk here, who's Senior VP of Sales for a while. He's retired now. And then we have a guy you might know as Jack Simpson, president from 1982 to 1992. And we're having conversations about how it all started, how all the pieces fit together, the people involved, the processes involved, the challenges. It's a fascinating conversation. And I want to ask the first question of this episode, Jack. When you came in 1982, you had people there. You had to bring in your own team, or did you use the team there? How did you decide who could stay and who could go? What was the key decision point at that point?
Well, I tried to assess their skill level and their ability to grow with the company. And in some cases, some of them were retired already. And I knew a couple of people that might come in, but I didn't want a bunch of old cronies. That won't work. I did end up with a couple of people I worked with before, but I used a search firm to find many new people. I also ended up, O'Hara wanted me to take some people, and I interviewed them, and they were fine. You know, Paul Nezzi came out to be sales. He was an assistant down there. And Sonia came out for a while. Several people. Ted Kramer came out from Mead, and he did a great job on facilities.
This is great.
Great job on facilities. Ann took over the Nexus sales force. And the sales forces, whether you have one or two, do we go to the legal market? Can they manage the other markets? Is the product designed for everybody or for the legal market? And I ended up conceiving of something that never worked quite right, but it was good enough. I had product managers and market managers. And that was a novel concept, and there was a great gnashing of teeth when I tried to get it in place, but I think we finally did. It never worked perfectly, but that was a problem. But back to the question of people, I hired search firms to bring people in. One guy came from McKinsey, one guy came from McGraw-Hill or whatever. So I found where we could, found talent. Now, another problem I had, which was unfortunate, and I got upset about it, Mead would recruit our people. Okay, it's just like somebody like the New York Times or Dialogue or somebody coming. It makes no difference who it is. They took good people. They took Jim McGrain. They took Dennis Redeker.
Oh yeah.
People like that went down. They took Rod at one time. Rod was going to be the controller. Bill Blabaum became the treasurer. MDC had better people than they do because they had thousands of people they could draw upon and out in their divisions, and they liked the ones we had. And we'd be functioning well, and then the guy would go or the gal would go, and we got to replace them. That was a problem. I never got that fixed. They considered them their people. And if we were totally independent, we would not have done that. We would have kept talent around longer. We would have had much better productivity than having a friend steal your talent. And they did.
So Keith, you had something you wanted to kind of go down a path on. What was that?
Yeah, we just, when we left our last podcast, we just started to open up the topic of pricing. And in the earliest days, pricing was what we would now call maybe primitive, but it served its purpose at the time, where we billed by the message units, and then there was a billing by time, and you and others had the point of view that, wow, that's not really as customer friendly or as aggressive even perhaps as we should operate. What should we do next? How did you evolve pricing in those days from what you found when you got there to as we move forward?
Well, pricing was indescribable. Even the old folks that knew what we had knew it didn't make any sense. I mean, to buy a computer and lose revenue didn't make any sense. And to price only by time didn't really get the value. And they had invented something called search units. And based on the occurrence of a word, you generated search units. And they had a list of words you're not supposed to use, and or the. I mean, you're going to get millions of those. Mm-hmm. But every now and then they would pick a good word, and it would run up 10,000, 20,000 search units. When that happened, the sales rep would get a complaint from the customer. The sales rep would go over and get the bill. They would call in to the finance department and say, "Can we do this?" And they'd end up giving them a credit. Now, when they did that, and were asked questions in the future about search units, they'd say, "Well, yeah, it's a lot of search units, but when we get through, it'll only be like $15 or $20 a search." And that was a clue, really. So customers can think about so many per search. We also, I was from a business that knew about value, and you price on value. I also learned quickly that being on the first page, the first menu page, was where everybody wanted to be, because a lot of customers didn't get past that page. So when a new product came out, they wanted it on page one. Everybody couldn't be there. So that was another set of teeth gnashing meetings to decide who's on page one this week, who's going to be there. So it had to change. So we did analysis of a lot of bills. We went through old bills, and we said, if we had priced this way, a basic search in this library would be 5. Over here's 10. Over here's 15. A group file in Nexis, maybe that's worth 30. And we postulated based on our view of value, and then we saw usage in those. So we had some data to work with. And so basically, at that time, I did bring in one guy. He was in charge of pricing when I was a systems manager. He knew all about pricing. He eventually invented the fixed price contract for big accounts, and they had a thresholds, and they go through the threshold. They need the next biggest account. He invented that, and we put that in for some accounts, big accounts. Now they still kept billing out their hourly rate, so they were making money on searches. They paid us a fixed price. I remember Skadnarps, $5 million. What? $5 million for legal research? Yeah, we signed a contract with Skadnarps for $5 million. And then it could escalate as their volume escalated. They got a whole bunch of searches in there for that price. At some point, we all agreed on it. Your volume has gone up. You need the next bigger plateau. It's $5.5 million, whatever. But it was not a surprise. It was a negotiated thing. But back at the BB level, which is what I call it, we had every search got valued and got priced. Then we went through the old billing records and said, how much revenue would we get out of this? And with some adjustments here and there, we were able to develop a structure that made sense. And it was earth-shaking the day we pulled the plug, stopped search units, and put searches out there. That was time-consuming on the sales force to go out and explain it, but it was well received. Like I said, we were held up for years, months, weeks, whatever, by the billing system. They didn't know how to do that. The billing system kept thinking it was doing search units. It didn't know the difference.
Wow.
You had to fool the billing system to essentially change pricing processes. Yeah.
Billing systems often they would have a new product or some new thing they want to do, and the billing system was the part that drug them back and held it back, because you got to have the ability to bill for it. I learned after the first few meetings that billing was very important, because we had an antiquated system and probably limited number of people. But every time you introduce a product, you got to price it, you got to put it in that system. And they were stretched to the limit.
So,
as I remember, in the earlier days, we were billing based on kind of the miracle of what Lexis could do. And as our customers become more educated and more experienced utilizing it, they also become tougher in terms of contending, perhaps sometimes against our pricing plan. So your, and I guess subsequent people who follow you, Jack, willingness to evolve how we priced our product kind of moved with how our customers were evolving too, because they got more knowledgeable. Plus the competition came from different places, not just one place as time went on. So I think that's been a key to the continued survival and prosperity.
Yeah. Well, the pricing gave the sales force an excuse to go in. So they didn't mind it so much, but they would go in and meet the managing partner and explain it well before we pulled the trigger. I don't think we surprised very many people, if any at all. And generally, we would hear the objections and we were able to counter the objections because it was better. It really was better. There wasn't no mistake about it. Nobody loved search units. Nobody wanted time. The new associates that came out of law school felt like they had a gun to their head when it was on time. And our sales force basically had hunters, which sold the account, and gatherers, which went in and did the training. And we had that for a long time because training was a big deal. The lawyers were not as literate as they are today with computers. And signing an account didn't mean beans until you had gone through training. And scheduling training for 10 or 20 at a time, that was a big deal, having a place to do that with enough computers in one room to do it. And those people were the ones who made the call before we ever pulled the plug to explain pricing and hear the objections and deal with them.
Jack, I want to get your
training centers all over the country too, right?
Yeah.
So, Jack, I want to get your opinion on something because when I joined in 1984, one of the things that stuck in my mind and still stuck in my mind is the fact that I think Westlaw made us a way better company. I hated Westlaw with a passion, and we wanted to beat Westlaw at every angle we could. And I think having a competitor like Westlaw, a Coke and Pepsi kind of thing, made us better.
I agree with that because if you don't have somebody pushing you, you become lackadaisical to some extent. You've got to have a reason. One of the things I learned in IBM, and I learned later, is if you want people to do a huge, big effort, you got to have a damn good reason for it. You got to have an ultimate cause. That's why many world leaders create a fake war with somebody, with us or whatever, because they rally the people around the need to get together to fight this big issue. I want to tell you what I did on the 5th day of my first week.
Oh, we're going to go back in time. Okay, we can do that.
Play back. Okay. The 5th day of my first week, I had a meeting in a conference room with Boston Consulting Group. You've heard of them before. Mead had paid money to have them come look at the Nexis business. And they were waiting for me to appear, or whoever it was, waiting for me to appear. Now, at that meeting, they explained carefully that we needed to consider a partnership with Dow Jones, not going to happen, New York Times maybe. There was another one, Financial Times or whatever. You had to have a flagship to build around. And the other thing they stressed is you have to have a critical mass of information. You have to have enough. If you're going to go into a market segment, you can't do it with one publication. You need the top 20 or the top 30. And the number we ended up with was 85% of the publications in the segment is what we aspire to. But anyway, Boston Consulting Group I'm in my first week, right? They say Nexis can't make it if you don't have this flagship. And we recommend taking a partner, selling a third of Nexis to get a partnership with one of these big hitters. A third, I got to give up ownership like that. Well, as it turns out, the New York Times was tired of losing money on their information service. So I'm here a few months and I get a phone call from Bill Kerr, who was the manager of the New York Times information service. He said, we're interested in doing a deal. I said, what kind of deal? We're ready to exit. Didn't have to give up a third of the company. I can do it with a license agreement. Holy smokes. So I grumbled, oh, you want too much, blah, blah, blah. But we did the negotiation. I got great pictures of it. The lawyer for them was Catherine Darrow, granddaughter of Clarence Darrow.
Oh, wow.
Word of Clarence Darrow. It was Catherine. And she was tough. We worked with her and we finally got a deal done. And the thing I learned in that, I had to look at the royalty structure. And we ended up giving them 27.5% for an exclusive. And every year you had to do the right paperwork to keep the exclusive alive. And they also wanted the morgue. And Keith, you may have been involved in helping connect those terminals, or I don't know if you were there or not. The newsroom was full of terminals, and we didn't know anything about them. And they didn't want to buy new terminals. And part of the deal was we had to connect to them.
The beginning of CPE, customer provided equipment.
Yeah. They had a pricing structure just for their morgue. And we had, a 24-hour rule is theirs. And after 24 hours, it's ours. And it's exclusive. Okay. And so we did the deal. We signed up and so forth. Well, about a year later, and they stopped losing $15 million a year. Okay, now their profit at that time was $40 million a year for the New York Times. So stopping losing 15 is a big deal. But they got a 27.5%. Had I did it all over again, everybody needed to be down 4 or 5%. We were paying too much product cost for the work we did. And I didn't realize it. And so I had to do something later. We did change Nexus pricing later in a slick way. But anyway, about a year later, we have a royalty check to give the New York Times for their first year. Now, they had the right to audit anytime they wanted to. We had, all the contracts. So Burnell Roberts and I get on the company plane. We go to New York, and we meet with Walter Matson. Walter's the president. And we review how things are going. And I give Walter a $5 million check. He fell out of his chair. Almost couldn't believe it. He could not believe it. He knew that they were saving money. He had no idea that he was getting a royalty like that, because the guys, I guess, had not briefed him. They didn't know how much it was, but he was so excited. And that was the great end of the first year.
That was the end of the first year, 1982.
No, we signed them in February or March of 83. I'd been here 4 or 5 months, and 2 or 3 of those months was spent going to New York to negotiate. All right. So then once that was done, there was a huge amount of work. We had to convert their old data over. We got all that stuff. We got rights to all that. We had to get tapes in that we could convert to keep it up to date. We had to get their newsroom morgue working. So it was a phase over. We got all the customers, and we had to communicate with the customers to go meet with them and tell them, we're the new guy. You're going to get what you had before, but you're going to get a lot more than that. So by the time we get that going, it might have been 3 or 4 or 5 months. I've had people tell me they worked on that. We've got a little website that's got 1,800 Lexis Nexis users, and I hear from people now and then. But many people worked on that. It was a big deal. And it didn't get the publicity it deserved, but it was major, because the Boston Consulting Group could not believe what we had done. We did a deal and made it work and got all the customers, got all the old data, got tapes coming in, got revenue from the morgue, not a lot of revenue, but some. And then their share, 27.5%, was $5 million first year. Earth shaking.
So I want folks to know, who are listening out there who are younger, to realize that back in 1983 and 84, the speed of a modem was 1,200 bits per second. Up to that point, we had simultaneous users probably somewhere in the 400 range, I would think. I remember we would celebrate every time we hit a threshold of simultaneous users on the system. The computer room was still relatively small, but everything in there were expensive. I think we had a terabyte of data at the time. We eventually got to 4 terabytes of data. But think about that. You can walk into Walmart right now and buy a terabyte of data. He's holding up for probably $100.
5
terabytes. So the way things have changed over the years is hard to believe, because of the fact that things have got so less expensive. Computer power is going through the roof. And think about what you used to spend. Those things you signed, those purchase orders you had to sign for DASDs and for mainframes and for front-end processors that could be replaced with an IBM with a Mac or an IBM right now. So
true.
Can I ask us to get to another topic?
Yeah.
I want to miss while we have Jack. Law schools.
Oh. Yeah.
You guys, in the earliest days, and then it continues to this day, did something really smart and amazing and difficult, and that was reaching out to the law schools. Can you talk about your thoughts of that strategic move?
I think Reuben knew that and tried to get something started. When he left, it fell apart. I remember Jim Romer coming to see me, and he had a bunch of charts and 3 or 4 charts. He showed the history of a law school graduate that, learned on Lexis, and he showed one that didn't. And he talked about what the sales reps told him when they went into the law firm. If the law firm didn't have anything, they wanted what they had in law school. Makes all the sense in the world. So we started pricing it at nothing, or even gave it away. And that was around 85. And we sucked it up. and didn't tell me that we had a whole computer probably doing law schools that we'd paid $20 million for, and we weren't getting any revenue at all. But we did see it start to pay off, and many law firms preferred Lexis. Eventually, they had both. But what they learned in law school was the one they would use. It's what they knew how to do. I think after I left, there were people that came in that said, we can't give anything away. And they quit doing law schools. And then 3 or 4 years later, somebody would wake up, oh, we got to do law schools. So I think it's been a sine wave of attention on law schools.
A resentment of the cost, and then you realize what you're losing when you're not investing.
I mean, it's not one where you see this and that. No, it's downstream. It's years ahead. And you got to have a broad view of the business and do what has to be done for law schools and for librarians. I went to a lot of librarian meetings.
And how did you decide to market? What was the marketing strategy back in the early days? Do you remember how you would
sell to anybody that walks in, sell it? No, not really. We had long debates with the sales force about how to get the job done, because we wanted to focus on law firms. That's where the big money was. Law firms that have litigators were even better. They were the backbone. I think they still are the backbone. And so we had a sales force that was doing that, but we didn't have corporate America or anybody else. There's a lot of financial institutions, corporations that needed Nexis. So that's when we invented product managers and market managers. We had market managers for large law, small law. We had it for corporations. We had it for financial institutions. And what they had to do was go to the Lexis product manager or the Nexis product manager and try to get their stuff in the system and convert it. And my job every now and then was to have a meeting and make a decision. Who's next? What's going to happen here? Who gets the next situation of the product that you need for your market? Many of them came in with a customer will tell them, if you had this, I'd buy it. Well, that's interesting. We listen to that, and then we check on them. Did they do that or not? Or were you making that up? So market managers and product managers, it was a mess. Everybody was confused most of the time. And we try to straighten it out. The market manager wants these things for large law. The product manager says, no, I need this for this guy over here. Basically, we tried to convert it all in. Tell me about revenue. Tell me about customers. And we're going to track it for the first year. And we basically tried to make the decision based on the business case. That was a novel idea. Make a decision about a database on a business case? Yeah, hate to do that. But we got everybody wanting through the door. It's just a little door, and you got all of you in there. So I knew when we created product managers, there would be a jam at the door trying to get in. Market manager would be jamming at the door to get to the product manager. But you have to have a management system, and that was the one we picked. But that way you had people accountable for customers, and you had people accountable for the product. And we had to somehow marry that matrix together. And that was a pig. It was mess all the time.
Thinking of the markets, there's another market that I want to touch, and that is, and they're implied, I guess, when we say the law firm. But Lexis in the earliest days was very much a large law firm product,
right?
Based on the way we operated, but more evolution, and some of it under you in your time. What did you do to say, what about small law firms? How did you help us turn to pay attention to the small law firm as opposed to so much emphasis on the big firms?
Well, there were advocates for the small law firm. There was a small law firm market manager. So I started listening as the first thing I did. Then we had the pricing manager, at least one of the few that I hired from my past. He was a brilliant guy. He figured out that we wanted to aggregate all the people that use this particular thing and look at them like a big customer and give them the pricing that they needed. We had various schemes to let a local law library be an aggregate point for small law. And that's one of the biggest things we did. And that got some usage. So they could go in, they had their own bills. They had the benefit of pricing. It wasn't kept from them. They could get to the same stuff the big boys had. So it was basically a sales force focus, a market manager focus, and a pricing guy focus that figured out a scheme, because we had the products, figured out how to price it so that we could make money and they could afford it. That's what we did.
Right.
So the last question for this episode, and then we're going to call it a day for this session, is you had roughly 600 people when you walked in the door in 82, I think you said. 3 years later, how many employees do you think you had?
Boy, I don't really have information about that. I know we ended at 4,000. I'm thinking 120,000 an employee was a number I remember. We probably had double that. In 3 years, we probably doubled that to 1,200 or 1,500.
Okay. And did you? I know you weren't involved in day-to-day hiring, but what was there a philosophy you passed down to folks when they were looking for people? What was that philosophy that said hire the guys that do this? Or
it started out with the fall business plan, and this was shocking that we had a business plan, but I had to allocate headcount by function. So I'd meet with each VP and listen to their story, what they're going to do, what they need to do before they did all the charts and all that stuff. And basically, we knew based on the expected revenue growth, which we were pretty good about plotting revenue. And sometimes it went up a little bit, sometimes down, but we were pretty good about cyclical business. This is what we expect the revenue. So based on next year's revenue, I would allocate headcount by market or product, and they had to fit within that. And from time to time, we could have a meeting and want to change that. And they would have to come in and show me why they want to change it. And we did. Sometimes we changed it. Sometimes we gave them more. And but basically, what we learned is you got to do what you say you're going to do. It can't be a song and a dance and then the revenue never appears. We'll catch you. If you need the people that can show us that, we do a little tracking. So we trust you, but we're going to track you. Then we would allocate headcount, and from time to time through the year, we'd give out headcount. I tried to save maybe 30 headcount and $1 million or $2 million out as a contingency. So I had a little kitty that I could spend. If at the end of the year, nobody had done anything, then we had a little bit better profit. Everybody on the profit plan got a few more bucks, but not enough to matter. What we did was we had a contingency. I didn't want to go take money back from anybody. So I had to build a contingency into the business plan. So my ability at IBM to understand that and how it worked and how to get through it was beneficial in this case. It just was scaled out.
All right, Keith, any final words on this version?
Just words of thanks for representing, as Terry and I are representing all the employees and retired employees of Lexis Nexis. Jack, thanks very much for being a part of this. It's a blessing to have you available. And you are as sharp as I did the day I saw you at work. So
I'm 82 years old. I have hearing aids. My goodness.
Good job, man. Thank you.
Well, we're going to post these out there, and if people are interested, maybe we're going to pick this up because you got stories about doing demos to the Supreme Court and all the good stories about that stuff. I hope we get into on the following episodes of this.
I got a picture of me and Jerry Mossinghoff, who was the commissioner of patents when we did LexPat. I used to make a lot of sales calls. I wasn't in New York, but I love customers. And so I would have sales reps take me out. We'd have a Simpson Day, and I'd go to the place and they'd have meetings lined up, and I'd meet people. And what was easy for me as a non-lawyer is I could talk about account management. You use Nexis to know what your customer's doing. Look at what you can find. And I would have some examples for their customers. So I have real stuff. And I could get a managing partner interested. He was really interested. He knew that legal research was going on, but his client development was important. And we could show him how Nexis could do that. So I was an advocate for Nexis. I didn't know enough about law to speak to it. I mean, I knew about citations and this, that, and the other. But so we did that. We talked about Nexis, and I got to visit a lot of customers, and I met a lot of good sales reps, and I was so proud of them. They were great.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it at that. And you never know. We might pop back in here later, a little bit down the road with some more episodes about the history of Lexis Nexis. So thank you all for joining us. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Bye.